Cayenne pepper could be seen as the archetypal stimulant, and lobelia could be seen as the archetypal relaxant. And when you combine them, very interesting things happen. So let's break these remedies down briefly here. Again, this is not meant to be an in-depth analysis of each of these herbs, just a high-level overview and a little breakdown of what happens when we put them together. So with capsicum, the taste is pungent. The primary affinities would be the circulatory system, the heart, the digestion. The actions we see central here, I would say primary action is circulatory stimulant. Now, because it's circulatory stimulant, it's also a diaphoretic because it's driving circulation to the surface and quite heating, right? It can make you break a sweat. So it's specifically stimulant diaphoretic. It's carminative as well as an expectorant. This is why anytime you have something really spicy, sometimes it hits your throat, hits your lungs, makes you cough, clears the lungs. Energetics, cayenne is hot and dry, right? Hot, dry, and stimulant. Though there's this interesting thing where when we're studying an herb, sometimes it's important to look at the difference between a short-term effect of an herb in contrast to a long-term effect of an herb. So you take cayenne and you get all hot and sweaty, right? It heats you up, it makes you red in the face, and you're like, oh, that's a heating herb. But you break a sweat and then you get cool, right? It cools you off. So we could say that cayenne has a short-term heating effect, a long-term cooling effect, predominantly through its diaphoresis. Now, lobelia is a very different herb, right? We might say these are synergistic. This is a synergistic pair, right? As opposed to a sympathetic or additive pair, right? These are two very, very different herbs. Lobelia is acrid in taste. Primary affinities would be the musculoskeletal system, the nervous system, as well as the respiratory system. Actions, it is relaxant, it is spasmodic, it is expectorant, and it is diaphoretic. Energetically, it is cool and dry and relaxant. I'm going to interrupt the lesson on lobelia and cayenne here real quick because I've got a super big important announcement that tomorrow on Friday the 13th, I don't know if that's going to be really good or bad luck for anyone and everyone, but nonetheless, tomorrow, Friday the 13th, 2025, we are closing our enrollment for Materia Medica Monthly. We have a really incredible special offer right now where if you sign up, you are going to get a free additional 4-week course when you sign up for Materia Medica Monthly by tomorrow at midnight Pacific time. And that free 4-week course is going to be you getting a sneak peek behind the scenes of me filming a brand new module for Materia Medica Monthly within the section that I call the Human Energetics Map. And this 4-week course is going to be an in-depth exploration of constitutional systems and how they integrate together to form a holistic understanding of people. So this is going to be a really awesome 4-week live class series that you get exclusive access to when you join Materia Medica Monthly by tomorrow at midnight. So be sure to click the link in the description somewhere under this. There should be somewhere in this video, on this page, in this podcast, whatever. The show notes. There should be a link somewhere for you to click and get all the details on Materia Medica Monthly and how you get a free bonus 4-week course on the Human Energetics Map and constitutional systems when you enroll by tomorrow, Friday the 13th, 2025 at midnight Pacific. So check it out. I hope to see you in there. And without further ado, let's get back to our discussion of the dynamic duo of lobelia and cayenne. We see immediately that there are some overlap here with these two herbs. They do have some similar properties, but in general, like their primary affinities are vastly different. There's a couple actions they have in common. The energetics are quite different. So let's go through these a little bit. Let's talk about the differences. So again, this pair is a great example of synergy in formulation because we have two drastically different herbs that when combined together do some really interesting things. I would say the differences is energetically, we see one is hot and the other is cool. We see one is stimulant, one is relaxant, as we spoke of. And I would say this makes them have a nice, somewhat humoral balancing effect, right? That said, Cayenne is very, very hot. Lobelia is cool. I would not say it's a cold remedy. It's cooling, certainly not cooling enough, I would say, to balance the warming effect of Cayenne. So I would say this pair would, depending on the ratios of the two, would probably have predominantly a net warming effect, definitely a net drying effect. And the combination of stimulation and relaxation is the main thing that we really want to focus on. I would say some of the primary differences would be the affinities, right? So Cayenne has a very strong focus on the mucosa of the digestive system, the respiratory system, the circulation of blood. It's really I really think of it as a cardiovascular herb. Whereas Lobelia is really working on the neuromuscular junction. Now, what's interesting about these two systems is that these are, I think of them as like global systems. They're systemic systems, right? Whereas like your liver is right here and your stomach is right here. It's like it's a vital organ. It has its kind of singular location. Whereas the cardiovascular system, vasculature is dispersed throughout your entire body. Nervous system dispersed throughout your entire body. Muscles dispersed throughout your entire body. So they're systemic systems. And in that way, these herbs have a very broad-reaching effect on the body. So they are, in a sense, very constitutional in that way. So there's very stark differences in their primary affinities. But what's cool that I'll describe here in a minute is how these two affinities start to overlap and influence one another. They also obviously have a pretty strong distinction in their flavor profile. This combination has a strong taste, right? Lobelia has a very strong acrid taste. Cayenne clearly is very pungent, as I'm sure you know. But let's talk about the overlap a little bit. So this is a powerful diaphoretic pair, okay? So we see these are both diaphoretic herbs. So it's additive in that they're both diaphoretic, but it's synergistic because they're different types of diaphoretics. And this is where these terms stimulant and relaxant really come in handy because it helps to further clarify the nature of an herbal action. It doesn't apply to every herbal action, but there are some where it does. So with diaphoretics, this distinction is I think, quite important. So the stimulant diaphoretic, in this case Cayenne, drives the blood up to the surface. It's heating, it's stimulating, it's moving the blood. The relaxant diaphoretic, in this instance Lobelia, relaxes the surface. It relaxes tension, so to speak, in the pores, tension in the capillary beds, so that blood can reach the surface easier. So I always like the analogy of the kink in the garden hose, right? Lobelia, if like all the capillary beds are kinked, they're constricted, the blood's not going to reach the surface. A relaxant diaphoretic unkinks the hose, dilates that circulation, opens everything up so that the Cayenne can bring it up to the surface. So that's a stimulant and relaxant diaphoretic combination, usually a really great strategy in the approaching treatment of fever. Also a very powerful expectorant pair. Again, additive in that they're both expectorant, synergistic, and that they do it differently. Again, a stimulant expectorant in Cayenne and a relaxant expectorant in Lobelia. So very, very useful for what we might think of cold, damp, phlegmatic, yet spasmodic coughs. Okay, that would be a cold, damp asthma, for example, might be a good consideration for a pairing of Cayenne and Lobelia. Now, we also see that this combination, from a constitutional perspective, is a very nice combination for Vata patterns, right? To use Ayurvedic terminology, Vata tends to be cold, dry, and tense. Now, obviously, both of these herbs are drying. This is a common feature in trying to address Vata patterns, but the Cayenne's going to warm up the coldness of Vata, and the Lobelia will relax the constriction of Vata. So a very useful pair here in addressing the pattern of Vata. The only thing I would say about it is Vata is quite sensitive, and these are pretty strong herbs. So you would just use small amounts. I generally like to use milder herbs for Vata because they can be so sensitive and mutable. But that is a consideration there. From a constitutional perspective. And in that instance, I would also add, from an astrological medicine perspective, very useful pairing for addressing the patterns of Mercury, who rules the respiratory system, governs the wind tension tissue state, can tend to be cold, tense, and relating to aspects of the nervous system, which Lobelia addresses very nicely. Now, Lobelia is not necessarily, some consider it nervine. I don't really think of it so much as a nervine personally. I tend to think of it as very specific for the neuromuscular junction. It's like, you don't use it like you do nervines